Hello and welcome to the Anomaly Project, The Agenda, the show that looks ahead to our upcoming show this week. And joining me is Steve Mera, as he will be every week. Steve, this week we're speaking to Malcolm Robinson, and this is going to be an absolute cracker. All things from portals, poltergeists, UFO and alien encounters. We've got a lot to get stuck into.
Well, there's not many people in the UK, researchers, that I'd be comfortable just grabbing a cup of tea and just spending the day talking with, because this is one of those guys who is just a different tier of the cake completely. The amount of research and the amount of years that he's put into this is tremendous. And I've always looked up to Malcolm, always looked up to him as one of the United Kingdom's important people in this subject. I mean, there isn't many of us, and we have lost a lot of people over the years through basically the elder generation. But we came into this subject early on. I know Malcolm's got quite a few years on me, probably at least 9 or 10 years on me. But when I got into this subject, I saw Malcolm. I looked up to him, his research, his effort, his goal to try and seek out the truth. And it really was that passion. It really grabbed him because you know what? I remember he had a very small caravan in the side of his house, and that was his office. That's where he did everything. And it was wonderful. There was all sorts of things up and around. I used to see photographs and things like that. And Malcolm's been also 360, a bit like me, to be honest. He's done the TV shows, he's been in documentaries, he's lectured internationally. He has been over to the US and stuff. He has lectured over there. He's still doing it now. He's a well-established author, and he's still writing books. He's got a new book out, and he's just a constant. It's just a constant barrage of everything. And yeah, and that's what happens when you get the bug, I suppose. I know it myself, and we spend all sorts of time, so much time, that it can impact even on people's lives sometimes, because it's so obsession. The obsession takes you with this type of subject. You want to know the answers. And the time is ticking. And we're naive to think, I am anyway, 41 years in, I thought I want to know the truth, but how long will it take? And I don't think it's going to take generations, I think, but when you're younger, you think you're naive and you think, I'm going to try and get some answers. Well, we do get some bits. And now, today, all those years on, we do know things which we never knew before. And Malcolm will see that reflection from when he started, like me, which we hardly have any equipment, big tape recorder, pad, a pen, a compass, binoculars, a tape recorder. And that was it. Compared to mountains of stuff we've got now. No internet back then, no mobile phones back then. You had to have boots on the ground. You had to go and visit places. You had to go and do research in the field. You had to do sit down interviews and transcribe words.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, so typing them out on a typewriter.
That's ours right there.
Wow. Flipping heck, how things have changed. But you know what? This gentleman, he's an exceptional researcher, and he is that layer of cake where you'll find just a handful of people in the UK which deserve in that spot, and he's certainly one of them.
Yeah, and I completely agree. I mean, I've been a big fan of Malcolm Robinson's for years. He's a solid researcher, he's a solid investigator. He's got some fantastic ideas as well. And as you say, he's one of the few people, not one of the few people, but certainly back then, that was looking at poltergeist cases and UFO and alien cases. Now, I'm sure we'll speak to him about if he's got a preference for any of these. But I think one of the first things I want to ask him is, what similarities have you found between these two subjects? Because he surely must have noticed something.
Now, yeah, I think when he started, like me, my mentors told me that if you're dealing with UFOs, it's a very nuts and bolts craft,
Hmm.
traveling the vast distances of space by non-human beings to visit Earth. And that was it. There was no other area, just that. And in regards to paranormal, it was, well, it's people who have passed away and we see them again. They don't really, occasionally we see them and occasionally they interact with them. It's just part of life. And I thought, okay, that's it. But as time goes on, you
Hmm.
realize, you know what? There's so much more to this. It's like the layers of an onion. And I think it's impossible for Malcolm not to have seen that transition like I have over the years, because it's changed so much and theories have changed, and now we're even calling things interdimensional phenomena instead of extraterrestrial. And there are connections between what you rightly refer to as paranormal and UFOs. I think that's been going on for a long time. I
Hmm.
think it got brushed under the carpet because people wanted to keep that division between these subjects, and it worked. It
Yeah.
really it worked. UFO guys and paranormal guys, and they all get together. In fact, they never see the light of day together. And in fact, now you've got people which are researchers, and they don't call themselves just ufologists or just
Hmm.
paranormal researchers. Because it encompasses so much more. And I think so many people now are seeing this connection between
Yeah.
the
Absolutely.
various and other things as well, being the gentry, the fairy folk,
Hmm.
the balls of light, spiritualism, paranormal, supernatural, demological, ufological, method, myths, legends, tale, all those things are all encompassed in one great big pot now. And I think that's the best way to deal with it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I completely agree once again. And we both know Malcolm. I mean, you've known him a lot longer than myself, but we're both fully aware of his work. And like you say, he's a very spiritualist person. It'll be interesting to get his take on all that, really, because as you say, you can throw anything into this pot, within reason. But yeah, you can venture into things such as astral projection, reincarnation, which will probably get his thoughts on all that. Because as I say, we both know he's a spiritualist person. We both know that he's got he investigates paranormal instances such as poltergeist, and he investigates alien abductions. So yeah, I'd like to get his thoughts on that aspects of his work, really.
Yeah, I think there's a lot. I mean, he's been involved in a tremendous amount of investigations, and I'm aware of some of his investigations into the paranormal, um, and also ufological
Mm,
stuff as well. So he's quite equal, really. I've seen, but as time's gone on, you may drift to more an interest in one particular side of the subject than another. I started as into the ufological stuff,
yeah, me too.
and then I went into the paranormal, and then back into the ufological, and then realized, oh, hang on, it's all kind of connected. So then it becomes encompassed. But you got to find that. You got to take that journey yourself. You've got to learn yourself, and you can't just accept everything that you hear, because you still have to remain skeptical. And I think he is. He's got a good head on him. He's
Mm,
open-minded, but at the same time, you have to be skeptical to some degree, because you can't just openly, willingly believe everything. I don't think it's down to belief. I think sometimes it's down to evidence. And there is good evidence, but it's what that evidence points to, because it's
yeah.
evidence of what? What is the source? What's behind it? Because when we talk about the abduction phenomenon, we talk about these alien greys, which seem to be the kind of new kids on the block at the moment. It used to be, people used to say, "Where's all the Space Brothers gone now?"
Yeah, yeah.
And not and many others, but most of them are these sort of grey, small beings, but they don't seem to have genitalia or reproductive organs.
Mm.
So the theory is that these are biological drones. So who's the boss?
Yeah, I
That's
mean,
what I want to know.
yeah, this is it. I mean, like you say, I mean, I've had similar theories and suggestions that they are kind of biomechanical or some kind of bizarre cyborg. But speaking about alien abduction cases, we should probably get his thoughts, Malcolm's thoughts on the A70 case, because as far as I'm aware, that was one that the Ministry of Defence even took an active interest in. So
Really is, and I think, as far as I'm aware, I think it's the only
right,
alien abduction case. I think it's the only one recognised officially in Scotland, that they paid attention to. They had an interest in, and it is a tremendous case. Now, the A70 is a rural location, and it was a profound incident that took place with two gentlemen
mm,
who saw a UFO hovering over the road, I think maybe 20, 30 feet above the road, with a beam of light that was coming down, and they didn't know what to do. In panic mode, they thought, step on it. Let's get under this and get under this and get away. Well, as soon as they entered underneath it, that was kind of the last thought, they had. And they had obviously some missing time, and Later, they revealed information pertaining to what happened during that missing time. And it's a tremendous case. When I looked at this many years later, not because there was any work for me to do really, but I
Mm.
was interested in the geology of the land and why that location. Now, if you look at the A70 on Google Earth and use a certain type of filters from satellites, such as positive magnetic regions, whoa, the A70 is right in the heart of a positive magnetic.
Fascinating.
And I thought, I don't know, I don't think that's by chance. And it
Uh-huh.
turned out through the research that I did carrying on, because we all are going our own path in Project Doorway, it was very significant to those type of experiences. And I totally believe that is the authenticity of that case is so profound
Yeah.
and very unusual beings, not your typical scenario of your stereotypical alien, like an alien grey. These things had a strange shaped heads and a long neck, but same type of eyes, of course. But very odd, very strange. But that's what makes it unique. That's what makes it strange, and sometimes even more authentic because it's not just your normal. I haven't. It's not like a copy of somebody else's experience.
Yeah.
You know, it was out on its own. And when I remember when I first heard about it, I thought, wow, that is a fascinating event. And it turned out that the Ministry of Defence, it caught the eye of the Ministry of Defence, and they were sniffing around. They wanted to know more about that. And that fascinates me. If they're interested in it,
Oh yeah.
I'm interested in it.
Absolutely. Like you say, they don't turn their attention to something for nothing. Certainly not something as bizarre as that. So yeah, we'll have to speak to Malcolm about that. I mean, he's been involved in numerous cases, investigated them, like the Livingston encounter, the electric UFO photo at Grangemouth was another one, I believe. Falkland Hill, which was another kind of abduction case. But we should also speak to him about some of the poltergeist cases, because like yourself, Steve, he's done some active investigations. He's reinvestigated old cases from the 60s.
I
Um,
think that's a good idea. I think sometimes you need to, because you need to cast over 21st century eyes
yeah,
and the technology we have on some of these old cases. It does reveal new data. And I think is a thing that we shouldn't just put them in a drawer and say, well, that's done now and move on, because new things can come to light years later. We see that all the time.
yeah, I completely agree. Like you say, new sets of eyes obviously sometimes, sorry, pick out new bits of evidence. I think it's also important, whether it's paranormal cases or UFO cases, um, just simply because you might pick up on a detail there that you think, well, hold on, I've read that in this case that happened 40 years after this. And so, and I write about this a lot in the articles that I put out there, that it's so important to re-examine cases all the time. You might not always find new evidence. You'll certainly may come up with new perspectives that
Yeah.
maybe people haven't thought about. But yeah, I think it is definitely important to re-examine cases. So we'll have to get his thoughts on some of the most fascinating poltergeist cases that he's been involved
Yeah,
in.
I think poltergeist phenomenon is probably the most profound I've come across.
Mm.
I've only been involved in six cases that I will say and classify as a poltergeist infestation. Um, it's not common. They are rare. And
Mm.
it's easy for people to jump on sort of channels, YouTube channels, and oh, poltergeist here, poltergeist there. Seems to be very popular. It's a bit too popular.
Right, yeah.
But from boots on the ground and doing the research, six cases I've been involved in, and two or three of them I've witnessed firsthand the phenomena take place. Sometimes it's very destructive, but it's very clever as well. And they have to be monitoring, they have to be listening
Mm.
into conversations. There was a very interesting incident that took place, and I think it was in Yorkshire. I'm not too sure. I think it was in Yorkshire in the 70s. And it was a family who were being plagued by these disturbances, and they had the priest out.
Oh, it's not
Hello?
the East Drive case, is it?
No, no, not East Drive case,
Right,
no.
okay.
But he did the no good work. Really, when you look at statistics, only 12% are blessed successful. According that
Wow.
we only 12%, often it work, but In this case, though, the family thought, well, we can't live like this any longer. But they'd realized that this thing listens in because they'd been talking about certain things like, did you pay that gas bill? No, no. Oh God, I forgot all about it. I'll pay it in the morning. It's on the, it's downstairs. Gone. No gas bill. Disappeared. And things that they were talking about seemingly the phenomena interacted with, it moved things that they were important to them. They realized that there was no sanctuary from
Mm.
talking about things. This thing must have been listening in. They decided to move. And the plan is not to talk about it in the home. We are not going to have a conversation. I think that this thing might be listening in. So they just went about it in a very quiet manner, slowly packing things up. And eventually they started moving things, and got them into a van out the front. And it was very quiet, all very calm, all very quiet.
Wow.
And the lady next door came out and she said, "Oh, Gina, are you moving?" And before she could even say a word, this rasping voice came out of the hallway where there was nobody and said, "Yes, they're flitting."
Wow.
I
Wow.
was like, at that point, it was like, bloody hell, tools down, guys. What the hell? It's going to
Had the
follow
right
us. You know
decision.
what I mean? And sometimes they do follow. It has been known to work, to other homes. So they are intelligent and they can interact that way. So you can't fool these things,
Mm.
because
Mm.
I think they're watching and listening, and I just don't think you can fool them. And in this case, that was a prime example. To be honest with you, are you flitting? You're so unusual for evidence. That yes, they're flitting.
Completely is, and it just makes an already what I would imagine is an ominous and terrifying case even more so. It's interesting that you mentioned there, about poltergeist because generally speaking, and myself as well, until I, really started researching this stuff, you think of poltergeist like hauntings, and you think of them as being contained within a building, one particular location, but. And I'd like to get Malcolm's thoughts on this, but let's get your thoughts now. I mean, it's not always the case. In fact, quite often, like you say, these things follow people to other locations. And I'm sure there's more cases like that than many people actually.
Well, and unlike that, then hauntings, which seemingly are tied to locational or residual, to these particular areas, poltergeist phenomena seems to be more attached to individuals, haunted people in a sense of speaking, rather than haunted homes or places.
Hmm.
And I think it's interesting to point out that um, when it comes to these types of disturbances, these infestations, which sometimes people say they're short-lived, not always, Sometimes they say that it's down to a catalyst, a
Right.
focus, an adolescent environment. Yes, but not always. You
No.
know, we have proven myself, and I'm sure Malcolm will identify with this, that it isn't simply wrote down in stone. You know what I mean? It's not
Yeah.
because it doesn't apply to everything. There is certain cases like that, absolutely, but there are people that have had incidents like this, poltergeist stuff for 9 years on and off, with no children,
Hmm.
no focus, no catalyst. Sometimes they don't follow, sometimes they do, sometimes they do on a number of occasions. So there is, you've got to accept the fact, yeah, okay, somebody's theory is good at the time until proven no, not that's not the case. And that's where we are in regarding this. We're still 2 steps forward and 1 step back. It's always the case.
Hmm.
But when it comes to these things, how do we even know that they're not actually doing the same thing in multiple locations? I mean, when it's quiet for a few hours or one night,
Yeah.
are they somewhere else? you know,
Interesting
um,
thought.
because are we looking at a mechanism that's doing this at multiple homes? Because I always find it interesting is, things that turn up that don't belong.
Right. Yeah.
Toys. Well,
Yeah.
no, toys turn up. Well, whose are those toys? Where's that toy come from? It's not ours. Don't know where it's come from. I mean, I'm wondering if it's going like this sort of thing.
Yeah. Between dimensions, even.
Yeah, so who knows? And we've got to go so far to try and understand. It's very, very difficult with these because they are rare,
Hmm.
they're uncertain, but they're intelligent enough to go, I'm not doing nothing. I'm just going to sit here and make you think there's nothing going on. And that can happen many times. How many times do you set cameras up, and you set them up and he's pointing this direction because things are happening over there all the time? It happens over there.
Yeah.
So what do you do? You point your camera over this way and then it happens over there. They're intelligent. So, and they like to play these games. And sometimes, we are caught on the hop. We tend to have experiences when there's no camera in our hand.
Mm.
The video is not running in that location. And it's not because, we're trying to hide anything. It's just simply as that these things are intelligent, right, and they don't want to get caught on film sometimes. Very, very rarely will they be demonstrative for you. It's
Yeah.
not impossible. It can happen. There's been a couple of cases I've been involved in when it has. But on most occasions, oh no, you bring your cameras in and then you'll start to suppress the phenomena. So it's a tricky situation that we know very little about.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting now. I mean, a couple of things that spring into my mind there while you're speaking. I mean, one, we talked about poltergeist activity and the possibly outdated notion that this revolves around pubescent children and things like because like you say, there's numerous occasions where that isn't the case. We could argue possibly that it revolves around energies that human beings in general might put out, certain human beings. And I think what's also interesting is, as you say, I mean, there's two ways to think about this. Like, you would turn up with a camera or you've got video rolling and there's just nothing happens. It could have been happening all week long. And as soon as you try and record it, no, not happening. So one, that shows intelligence is one way to look at that. But is it, we might also contemplate, is this increased electrical energy, just some electrical devices, somehow just interfering with the energy that's coming forth? Like you said, there's so many things to grapple with.
Certainly an intelligence, but where is it born from? I do not know. And is it attributed by us, by that environment, by the energies, by our reactions, our negativities, or whatever? There's been countless ideas, but there does seem to be a pattern of the most traumatic poltergeist type disturbances are either in families where there are children which are having family issues, be it financial, the living conditions aren't good, there's been breakups in the family, there's been problems. So there's a high stress environment. And some people have thought, well, like a moth to a light bulb, this is an attraction. However, they can also be associated to people who are devout Catholics. Devout Catholics have had tremendous traumatic poltergeist type disturbances. So it's hard to actually pinpoint down, but there is some little patterns. Yes, in some cases, yes, they seem to be attracted to environments where there's high vexation, stress, worries, upset, that sort of thing, problems, and sometimes children, adolescent age. But then sometimes it's the opposite, and it's like just people that are devout Catholics get taunted. I don't know the reasons why, but when it comes down to poltergeist infestations, there does seem to be what you might refer to is a process of development, because poltergeist infestations tend to start first off by audible disturbances. These are sounds, bangs, knocks, things that are going to disturb your sleep pattern and cause you to become tired and anxious. This is how it first builds up. Then it goes to the next level. It never does. It always this process of these levels, which is the second level, is it starts getting into object manipulation. And I say object manipulation because that means it covers everything. It's objects that are found to have been moved. It's objects seen to have been moved. It's objects that are port. It's objects that stack. It's objects that are arranged. It's objects that combust. It's object manipulation. Then it goes to a third stage. And that third stage is what you might refer to as visual phenomena. Balls of light, amorphous dark shapes. Occasionally, some people say even an apparition. But I think it's generated through what people think it is. If you think it's an old neighbor used to live here, it might manifest as that. I think it's looking for something. And then into the fourth area, which is physical interaction, which is they tend to prod you or pull your hair or scratch you, things like that in some cases. And one of the investigations I did, one of the girls got pushed down the stairs and she broke a leg,
Wow. Wow.
and the church revolt, so sometimes it can be quite bad. And then you start getting the higher layer where it affects you psychologically. So
Right.
you become oppressed and depressed, and you start to not communicate, as this thing can take out. And then when it goes any further than that, you start getting into the dark stuff,
Yeah. Yeah.
which are three stages of demonology, and that's when things get. So there is a connection between some of the poltergeist stuff and some of the darker stuff, where there's a crossover point, you know. But most of the time, they've been seen to be playful, seen to give offerings. But the opposite end of that is that they've been destructive. They've hurt people physically, and they've tortured them and tormented them for a long time. So but it is probably the most significant of all subjects within the paranormal, which is absolutely fascinating. Butter knives that are found to be stood up.
Mm, mm.
Now, everything does have a balancing point.
Yeah. Yeah.
You try and balance a
Yeah.
butter knife, you'll never do it, but it does have a balance point. And yet, you can walk in and you suddenly see a butter knife stood up, and you think, oh my God. And as you approach it, you get near it, a micro spot of air,
Can't-
it falls over.
Yeah.
How did he how did he find that balancing point on these things? It's incredible.
It's almost as if whatever this thing is, or these things are, however you want to view it, Mod, it is that they have some kind of, they resonate somehow with the universe itself, and it's
Really.
just really is mind blowing.
It really is mind blowing. And we also discovered that when things have been moved from one location to another, that when we certainly started looking into about, well, how far was it moved from that point to that point, which is referred to as the displacement number, whatever reference that length is. When you measure these things, when you have other occurrences in the home sometimes with other things being moved around, if you take the time to look and measure them, you'll find same numbers turn up. Oh,
Wow.
it's
Synchronicity.
43.6 inches. Well, that one was 43.6 inches. Why is that? And the one in the bathroom was 43.6 inches. Why is that? There's a mechanism. There's something
Mm,
at play here. It's got some type of a mechanism. And there's also, and because it's progressive, because if I go into a home and say, we've got a poltergeist and she's been touched with my daughter or whatever, or scratched, I already know that they've gone through one, two, and three.
right. Okay.
And
Yeah.
then I'll say to them, well, when did it first all start? Well, 6 months ago. And did it start with bangs and knocks? Yes. Right. I said, and what about objects moving around? Well, that started to happen after that. There's always a pattern. So it's like there's a rule book and a mechanism, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like you're looking at the inner works of the mechanism of how it does stuff. And that's what fascinates me. It's not what all this is happening, because I know it happens. I've
Yeah.
seen it,
Yeah.
I've experienced it. But it's like, how does it work? How does it happen? That fascinates me, because I think that is the clue to understanding what these things can do.
Yeah, and I think that's clearly what keeps people like yourself, me and Malcolm coming back and staying in this subject for decades. In case of yourself and Malcolm, certainly. We should probably get close to wrapping this up, Steve. But I mean, one other thing I think we should ask Malcolm about, because obviously, he's done his work in poltergeist activity, but he's also done a lot of work with UFOs. Um, and everyone's got a different opinion on this, and they're all equally as valid, really, because UFO disclosure, we don't really know anything more than we did 3, 4, 5 years ago, and
You're
are
right.
we likely not to? I mean, we should ask him what his thoughts are and all that. Really.
And I think you're right. I think he's seen the same things I've seen, and we can go back to one of the earlier ones, which was the Citizens Against Ufology movement. I think, what was that, 70s? I think.
Right.
And then we had the Disclosure Project with Stephen Gray in the 90s.
Mm.
Then we had the Citizens Against Ufology, no, Citizens Hearing for 5 days. And now we're into the second UAP hearings.
Hmm.
Yeah. Have we got anywhere? Well, it was all really interesting at the time. And I think the Disclosure Project with Stephen Gray was good with the press group. And that was probably one of the best. But, lots of people, very important people. And you think, wow, this has got to lead to somewhere. And you know what? It didn't.
No.
But what's it going to take if you haven't got generals and pilots and, all sorts of high ranking officers that are coming forward and saying, I will testify in a court of law. And if that doesn't work, what is going to work? What have we got to do to shake it up to get some info out? And the problem is that even now, 21st century in the European hearings, there are more and more people even questioning what we're even getting out of them. Because we might get information, but then how true is the information? You know, now I can honestly say though, the only difference is the fact that the subject of UFOs is not the elephant in the room anymore, which is a good thing for
Yeah.
many people. And someone somewhere thought, okay, well, we've got to come up. We can't keep swallowing this pill. People aren't going to take it anymore. For
Hmm.
70 or 80 years, they've just said, oh, don't worry about it. It was a balloon. It's a misidentification. It was geese flying at 20,000 feet and the bellies were reflecting the light off the ground. It was swamp gas.
Yeah.
It won't work anymore. We are technology advanced. We understand the situation now. We're not numb like people years ago were. They didn't know about it. They trusted the government. Must be. Do we trust it now? Very unlikely. So they can't just brush that over anymore. So what they did is turn around very cleverly and said, well, okay, well, we don't know what they are. Unknowns. In other words, they've reinforced the fact that the UFOs are in fact real
Yeah.
from their standpoint. And it's not from me anymore. It's what the Pentagon said, or it's what the military said. So that was a good thing that they've changed that. But then moving forward and trying to get more information, it's all about the authenticity of it, the credibility of that information. And even now, people are starting to question even the stuff that's coming out from the Pentagon and some of the people that are involved in trying to get the information out. Sometimes you get the odd dodgy thing it's in there,
Oh,
and you think, why have they put that in? So it's like I say, two steps forward, one step back. Eventually, one day, I think we will get there, but I'm not going to hold my breath anymore
hmm.
and wait and say, well, disclosure might come next year or next year or next year or next year, because I just don't. It's like it's just out of reach. So I'm just going
Yeah.
to absorb it and expect and say, look, you know what? I'm going to do my part for it as much as I can do, but I'm not going to wait for the old fellow Americans. They've landed on the White House lawn. I mean, it's just never going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me of a quote from, just to finish up on as far as UFO disclosure goes, it reminds me of a quote from Alan Watts, I think it is, where it's all retch and no vomit. And I
That's
think
it.
that's exactly where we are right now. But Steve, thanks ever so much for joining me, my friend.
Welcome.
It's been a nice chat there. It's going to be a great show. Thanks ever so much.
Looking forward to it, and I'll thanks again. And looking forward to meeting Malcolm. I haven't talked to him for a while, so it should be interesting.
Me too. And remember, you guys, it's going to be Friday, the 9th of May, 9 p.m. You'll be able to watch our chat with Malcolm Robinson. As always, make sure you subscribe to our channel. Make sure you follow us on social media and check out the Anomaly Project podcast.com. Until next time, take care and goodbye.